naturist and a compost expert, and he's going to tell us where he comes from. And
hi everyone, I'm Don Smith. Thanks Barbara for the introduction. I live in West LA. I'm an avid worm farmer, and I'm a worm consultant and a composting person that knows too much about composting, but I'm happy to share it. So I'm here today to help demonstrate Barbara's homemade worm in, and I'm going to point out a few things that she won't like, but it's just the reality of the thing. It's beautiful that she made it herself. It takes a little bit of time and effort, but she obviously put some in. The opening at the bottom could be a little bit larger, because what happens is the vermicompost becomes monolithic. You put it in and it's all nice and loose and fluffy, but as it goes down, after 18 inches of it, this thing will weigh 60 to 80 pounds with moisture. So it's a lot of load, and as the worms process everything and all the other biology processes it, it gets smaller and denser. So at the bottom, if it's really small opening, you're going to have trouble loosening it because it's wider here, and you have to be able to reach up inside there and scrape it away. So it'll still work. It'll just be a little more effort at the bottom. You'll have to poke around.
How would you solve that problem?
Make the hole bigger.
The hole bigger.
Just a little bit bigger
Or
opening.
you could put in a zipper on the bottom.
You could.
So that you
I mean,
zip it.
well, once it's full though, you're not going to be able to like that weight's pushing down. It would be, you'd have to put it on its side. It would be challenging.
Right.
So it'll work. It could be a little bigger, but you didn't have a real model to look at. So this is really good for a first version 1, let's say. And the other thing is that they do sell these little pieces that have a little plastic clip right in the corners. It's just extra money for plastic pieces, but you can buy something that's pre-made, and the ones that you buy already made have heavier canvas loop that you can put on those little clips. It's really clean and simple, but it's still using PVC. You can be just as creative, and if you're going to mount it from something, either a tree up above, you can have little spreaders that hang straight down, and it won't come in on itself because the volume of the worm stuff will keep it pushed out. Lots of ways to do it. It's basically, you feed it at the top, you harvest it from the bottom. It's quite simple. So we've got this empty worm bin. We've got some worms over here that have been working on some other material, and we've got, it looks like new worms, which I haven't looked at yet, but it says there's earthworms in here. Now that's interesting, because if these are earthworms, it says composting red wigglers, and there's 200 in here. And I'm not sure why it says to put them in your garden, because usually these types of worms, if they're composting worms, you keep them in the top layer, so they're not going to burrow down like what you might think of as an earthworm, because the composting worms are really a surface worm. They're called epigeic. That means they're on the upper part of the soil, and they live in leaf litter and compost piles, manure piles. You put food on the ground, worms will find it, and it's usually these guys. And we did that in your compost pile. That's how we got some of those.
I want to take them home where I could keep an eye on them, and I'll just keep bringing them back when I have worm days.
Yeah, and then nothing can really get by it because it's going to be stuck to the walls there. And then that's just sitting there rotting for 6 months. I shouldn't say rotting, decomposing for 6 months, and it won't really decompose. That's amazing. Newspaper, once it's wet, it presses together, it's anaerobic. Air has trouble going through it. So I don't really like to use this as my bottom layer unless I'm doing like just a couple ply thick, because it can't breathe very well. And so I wouldn't want to put this much in there, but maybe a thin sheet. Cardboard is different. Cardboard, because it's got that corrugation, it doesn't compress. It'll sit there literally for months, and it will slowly decompose, but oxygen can still go through. And that's kind of where these guys come in, which is what I think some people that you read online, some people, I don't know if you read this for the bottom or just to add it to, because egg cartons do break down, and they're good food. Right, that's cardboard rotting. We could put that in, sure. So.
Do you want my gloves since you're doing all this?
I go out at night.
If you have snails
rescue.
and they bother you. Yeah. They're kind with the pointed.
I think that's going to be sufficient, actually. So we're just doing a really simple, it's one that way and one underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And once that's wet, it's going to, and weight gets on it, it's going to conform to the bottom. And that'll still allow some air in. The other nice thing about the worm ends is that it's a breathable material. This isn't plastic. So you'll get oxygen coming in. And that's kind of the downside. Most plastic bins don't get the airflow. They have to put vents all over them unless you have a lot of extra space like this one, which is awkward to use because it's really deep. But it's a really decent design, and I think it works better than any bin. So these guys we're going to put at the bottom because there's some processed vermicompost there, and that processed stuff we're going to put some better food on top, and so they'll still work through that stuff over time. But as she feeds it as they go up, you'll see that that'll be the stuff you harvest first, and it'll be fairly well processed.
Okay. Tell me how to feed the worms properly.
Okay. So it might look like you want to fill up the whole bin at first, but that's not how you do it. You're going to feed them, and when that food disappears on the surface, you know it's processed, you add more food. You always want to wait till they process it. If you put a big pile like this, it's going to start to compost in there, which could start to smell bad. And you say that these don't smell. I beg to differ, because I go to worm bins all the time that have gone anaerobic, and they are putrid. So if you're not managing your worm bin correctly, I'm not saying yours smells.
Oh, I was wondering. Mine does.
Your 5
Mine
days
is
are up,
roses,
Barbara.
Barbara.
Mine
It smells
smells
like
very
roses.
sweet.
Your 5 days are up,
Exactly.
Barbara.
Everything that Barbara
Breeze in there.
touches, everything that Barbara touches smells like roses, so we're in good shape. But I'm just letting you know that I've seen plenty of worm. I get calls all the time from people that have something's wrong with my worm bin. It smells bad. It's gone anaerobic, and that's bad. So it should never smell bad. If it smells bad, you've overfed it, overwatered it, you've over-something it. It didn't get enough oxygen. So you can either, any of those three or a combination of those three will cause your worm bin to smell. So if you smell odors coming from your worm bin, something's wrong. And that's when you need to go, okay, what is it? Is it too moist? Is it too compacted? Do I need to, what should I do? Usually you need to add carbon, which would be paper or cardboard to it if there's an issue, because it's probably got too much food and it's too condensed. So you need to add something that's going to slow down the reaction, which is usually cardboard. So as we're filling up this bin, it's a very slow process. You actually build layer by layer by layer. So you're going to add 1/2 to 1 inch of material. You can add 2, but the odds of something funny happening are worse. If you add 4 or 6 inches of extra material, things might occur that you don't want. So generally speaking, when you do feed it, you want to look and see, have they eaten the food that's in there? Have they finished eating it?
How can you tell?
Because you won't be able to tell what the food is that was in there. It'll look like
Dirt.
that. What is that?
Oh.
I don't know. It's living because I see little things on it, but it looks pretty well processed. So that's broken down something. What? I don't know. But I would say that this is not something I can recognize, so I would feel comfortable if that was what it looked like on the top. It would be very easy to go, I think they're hungry. It's pretty easy to tell. The top of this is a little dry, but it's not something that you live with daily. So
Now
it's
it will be something I live with daily.
yeah. So this is actually a lot to start with in there, but it's good because we'll put this in and we'll put those worms in, and that'll just be our start. And we might put a fine layer of manure on top. But this is actually a pretty decent amount because the bottom of this is sort of small. So we could be really nice and gentle, but the reality is we're going to disturb these worms somehow. So I'm going to try to do it gently, but it might not work. And you can videotape this if you want and say I'm an evil person. But
do you want the shovel?
do you have your
So
little...
ideally you have the cardboard.
So ideally, do you want to just hold this on the edge, just so it won't, I don't want anything to fall over.
Now, if it were new, what would be going in there? So vermiculture?
If it was new, we'd be putting in, so there's some worms. And see, it's a lot moister down at the bottom.
They've grown.
Yeah, there's some nice, healthy, fat specimens in there. So this is pretty well worked. A lot of this is pretty well worked. So there goes. So you can see there's different size. There's a little baby. There's an egg right there. See the cocoon?
Where?
Right here. That's a cocoon. Sorry, I'll get it in the sun. Somebody's blocking the sun. Right there. That was me blocking the sun, I think.
The little white.
Like a little peak.
Okay, so I'm gonna just pour this in, and pretending to be gentle here.
As much as you thought.
Well, there's a bunch still in there, so we're gonna loosen that up.
We can scrape it, and then they'll
Yeah,
come out.
I'm gonna use this. And you try not to be very gentle, but I like to try and treat my worms with care.
What if you cut one in half?
You have 2 dead worms.
They don't grow back.
Shut up.
So somebody that studied this said that if you cut off more than 7 segments off the tail end of the worm, not the head end, there is a tail end of the worm. If you cut off more than 7 segments, you will have 2 dead sections of worm. If you cut off less than 7, the short piece that you cut off, that's dead, but the worm will survive and regrow the segments. So they can regrow some, but it's a myth that you can't cut a worm in half and get 2 worms.
What from your kitchen is it good to feed your worms, and what should you not feed your worms?
Do not feed your worms glass. Do not feed your worms metal. Do not feed your worms plastic. But regarding food, generally you don't want to put meat. It's not that it won't decompose, but it'll smell bad and attract other critters. Don't put cheeses or fats or oils. So if you have, leftover salad, but you had a nice heavy dressing on it, you really don't want to put in there. But everything in moderation, they'll eat just about everything. And it's pretty amazing. But they do have certain favorites. They love like apples and melons and pumpkins. They seem to have an affinity to sugars just like humans. It's kind of interesting, but they do love that stuff. If you put a watermelon piece in there, they will come swarm that thing. It's amazing. Okay, so
Like that small?
Okay.
yeah.
You like-
You can experiment. You can put it in that size and see what happens. Put them in different sizes.
I don't
It
think
takes a long time to break down.
But that's not big enough for them to get in.
They're not getting
They're
into
not getting
it.
in.
It's not a hotel for them.
Yeah, it's
They-
not a hotel.
they-
She wants to create this little
Here.
hotel.
She wants
for
a
them.
little-
Okay, so
A little
do it that
nest.
way and put them in
She
like
wants a
that.
little
She wants a
nest in
B&B.
there. Yeah, she's
She's
placing
gonna
it.
run the B&B.
No, it's B and B and
Tell
B.
by the
Barbara's
way I
B and
made
B.
my worm in with matching fabric. That
Oh, is this
I'm,
one that's tied? Right?
I'm concerned.
So see how little we have in it and see the weight
Yeah, but-
already?
Right.
And
but
that's
this
not
one
even
isn't-
properly moistened
This
or
one didn't get tied in.
would put a layer of manure on top, and what that does is that stops everything that's attracted to a banana peel, say a fruit fly. They're going to smell manure instead,
Yeah.
and they're going to go, ew, that's
Ew.
gross. But if you mix it in and there's that piece of banana or apple
Sticking
or whatever
out.
up at the top, that fruit fly is going to come, even with this,
Yeah.
they're going to be around. And
Yeah.
you'll find that you don't like zipping and unzipping. You might just lay this on top.
Yeah.
And you can put a piece of newspaper, this is another way to do it, is all you do is after you've watered and got it all saturated, you can just put a piece of newspaper over the top, and that also keeps some of the smell and helps retain moisture. You can get a piece of cardboard that fits the top perfectly, but I like airflow, so I don't want to push anything down too tightly on it. But just leaving a piece of paper on top, it can be damp paper, some people use carpet, and you can use all sorts of stuff to keep it from drying out, and it keeps it dark as well. So that's a good, this if it's sunny, the worms are going to flee to the bottom because the sun's coming through. You have a piece of paper making it dark underneath, or a piece of cardboard, and it will be fine. So
Okay, we get to put the worms in.
so here we go. Now those all need to be moistened. Do you have something to
Here.
spray with? Oh, look at that. That's not fertilizer, right?
Water. I'm kidding.
Miracle Grow.
No, she won't use that.
Okay, so anyone want to look at So they put in, it looks like cocoa core. Should we count and make sure? So there's a cocoon, so that's good. They
If there weren't any
actually,
kids here, I'd
they
make
laid
them
an
count.
egg or wherever they harvested from.
Where's the cocoon?
Right there, this little yellow guy
Oh.
in front of my thumb.
Oh, right there. Oh,
Right
okay.
there.
Oh, it looks like a little bead.
Exactly, they're little yellow. They call them cocoons. Or you could call them eggs, but the way they're formed interesting. So the worms in this have all fled to the bottom. So this is just moist, somewhat processed cocoa core. So it's kind of, you can see how worms behave because as I dig down, right now they're kind of panicking because first of all they don't like vibrations. If you think about a worm, they're not used to the earth they're in moving or whatever surface they're on moving a lot.
Unless they're from Southern California.
And then they also don't like the sun. So I can just slowly skim off, not that I need to, but I can slowly skim this off and the worms keep going down. So then they'll just be a really dense pile. But I'm not going to do that because I'm going to keep my nails clean.
So we're going to show you just use the material that comes with the worms, put that in, that should be your starting base.
So here's your
Oh,
right
wow.
there.
Hold that live
That's what
shot.
came with it.
So those
So if
are
you just put that in,
those are the
period, would
compost
that be
worms then.
sufficient?
No.
No.
Because it's already been eaten
That-
to some
And then some
extent.
manure. And then
Yeah.
the food
Yeah, I
goes
mean,
in.
it's
No, the
sufficient
food and then the
for what we're doing here, yes.
But I can't see the food. They've eaten.
How many worms do you usually start off with?
As many as I can afford. I also would say it depends on how much square footage you have. And I do it based on square footage as opposed to volume because the worms only live typically in the top 6 inches is where these worms are going to live. You might find some that are deeper in if there's really good food down there, but generally speaking, these worms are surface dwellers. They do not go burrowing deep into the soil. So that's why I don't really care about volume. I care about surface area. And a good healthy worm bin should have something like a little over 2 pounds per square foot. So if we looked at this and we say, oh, this might get up to 2 square feet almost, based on its size, it's about 2 square feet. So it could probably handle about 4 pounds of worms, and we're putting in about, this says 200 worms, I didn't count them, there might be 200 worms in here. So if there's 600 worms, that's probably maybe half a pound or slightly over half a pound. Supposedly there's 1,000 worms a pound. I don't know who did the count, but that's just a number that always gets thrown around. But it depends. How big is your worm? I can give you a bunch of 1-inch worms that are, pencil lead thin, or I could give you some 3-inch worms that are, thick, 3/16 of an inch thick.
Could we go back and talk about the square footage? It would seem like this bin is very deep. Would you prefer a bin that is, say, 2 feet by 2 feet instead of 1 foot by 2 feet? Flat and bigger is better because it's more surface area?
No. The whole point of having a bin that is deep like this is a very specific type. This is for using what they would call flow-through method, meaning that you feed it at the top and you harvest from the bottom. If you let's say you do the same method and it's only this deep, well, you're going to have worms. So when you do your harvest, you're going to capture some worms. You might also be capturing eggs or cocoons, I should say. So if you're harvesting your cocoons, they're not having time to hatch out. By having that depth, if you think of your fresh food up here and it goes down, that's a strata. Not only, let's say you put it in at 1 inch, by the time it gets to the bottom, it might be 1/4 inch of material. So you've just got a series of these shrinking stratas as they go all the way down. And somewhere a cocoon was laid, and as that's going down, as you feed over to the top of it, it's going to hatch and the worms are going to go up. So by the time you're harvesting at the bottom, you'll see cocoons because they leave, but instead of it being yellow, it'll be brown and it'll be empty. So you have empty cocoons that come out the bottom of your bin. All your living cocoons will have hatched and still be going up. So your population will continue to grow until it regulates based on just the sheer volume. It's like any other population, a confined environment with a food limit. It reaches its limit, just like the Earth will reach its limit of humans that can inhabit it. Only if you want to. It's not.
Okay, no, let's put the manure in.
Okay. So
Glove
Barbara,
time.
where'd you get the manure?
Um, I have a friend whose name does not wish his name to be revealed, but he lives next door to a horse property, and LA recycles horse manure. So you put your horse manure in a container out on the
a
sidewalk,
brown bin.
brown bin, and they pick it up. So I have an arrangement.
They don't eat rocks, just so you know.
Okay. I have an arrangement with this person, and periodically he brings me horse manure, which you have to lay out for. How long do you think you should lay it out?
I think it varies depending on temperature, moist. Did it rain?
so
Did
it's
it not
dry.
rain?
Yeah.
You basically
Stop
you can
smelling.
pre-compost it as well. So you could actually get a bunch of it pre-composted. All the large-scale vermicomposters, they use pre-composted manures. So that means they're getting them up to temperature because they want to get rid of pathogens and weed seeds. So we're probably going to be introducing weed seeds into your compost. If you're lucky, the way this works out is that they will sprout they're in here because the moisture's right, temperature's right, and they'll sprout. And then they'll get covered with more stuff, or you pull them out and you let them compost. So that's what will happen with that stuff. You want to see water come between your fingers, but you don't want to just, if you pick it up, just have it pouring out. You want about 80% moisture. They can go down to 30% moisture, so I'm not worried about this is too dry, but it will dry out. And cardboard, if it's not pre-moistened, is it'll suck in moisture. You have to use newspaper, whatever you want to use. You could cut this box and put a nice, you could probably get a size that big, but this is a perfect fit,
When I get
right?
home.
So you can do that and be quite happy.
Is there any kind of paper that you shouldn't use?
Yes, glossy magazine paper is typically the only one that will have heavy metals in it still. Almost all your colored papers are now soy-based inks. I shouldn't say colored paper, colored inks are soy-based. So even the colored newspaper section, but anything that's glossy print, that's still typically you wouldn't want to use that.
Okay.
So, and I'm not a huge fan of paper. Paper's great because it's basically waste. It's great, but it doesn't have a lot of nutritive value. So it's not the same. Like if you have the choice between manure and paper to feed your worms, I'm going to choose the manure every time. It's much higher nutrient, and your vermicompost is going to be much more potent. But it's a great way to get rid of your extra paper or your shredded paper, etc. And a lot of people will put, if you have a paper shredder at home, you'll take, they'll have a 6-inch layer of paper on top. That keeps out the fruit flies, provides that dark cover just like that sheet of paper does. So lots of ways to do it. And then when you feed it, you just move the paper to one side, put your food in, cover it back up, then you do the other side and cover it. And now you're keeping away your other fruit flies, etc. And the worms can live in the bedding, but as soon as that paper gets wet, it'll tend to go whoosh and compact, and then you can go anaerobic. So you have to pay attention if you're using paper. That's the
When you have bins.
if you have a bin, it's better to have two, because you can let one finish and then harvest one, and then the other one you're loading, etc. So if you have bins, I like 2 or 3, because it takes a while for compost to actually happen. And if you're constantly putting new stuff in, and you've got finished stuff and add new stuff and you mix it, it takes a while for the new stuff to break down. So it's much easier to just stop and let that bin just do its thing, turn it, and it'll finish, and then you move over to the next one. Whether you're doing it in a closed bin, like I don't like closed bins personally because they can go anaerobic and all sorts of bad things can happen to them. But they can, if you manage it correctly, they work great. So it's just all about management. If you open it and it stinks, you did something wrong. If you open it and it smells fine, then no problem. Just like your worm bin. Turning it, making sure it doesn't get too moist, because let's say you're always putting in vegetable scraps. They're filled with water. As it breaks down, that adds a lot of moisture to your bin. If it doesn't have enough ventilation in it, some of them have no vents, some have vents, but some will get clogged. So it just depends. If there's too much water, it's excessively wet, it'll go anaerobic and it'll start to lose things that you don't want.
What if you add strips of newspaper?
That's
or
what you would
leaves?
do.
Does that help?
Yes, it's all about the carbon to nitrogen ratio. So if you're paying attention and you're managing that to keep it from getting too wet, you're adding in your cardboard, your egg cartons, your shredded paper. But once again, too much paper gets all clumped together. So it's always this mix. So I like to mix things and then put it in. It's like if you just put in a bunch of paper and then you turn the bin, that paper, it just gets squished all together. So it's much better if you can mix it into your food particles or whatever first and then put it in, just so it's kind of interspersed. It stops clumping. Clumping is your problem.
Well, I want to take this chance to thank Don.
Thank you, Barbara.
Appreciate it.
We love you.
Can't wait to get mine going.
Here. And now we're all going to have warm bins. Actually,
Yay!
to receive something called Champion of the Community Award.
Oh, cute.
And it's the highest award that an individual can win in the state of California who's not a professional recreation and parks employee or administrator. And it is for the garden. So I'm going to be, I have to go up to Sacramento or San Jose in March to their conference and receive an award.
Wonderful.
And I could not have done it without all of you guys.
Yay.
So you're part of it. And if City Council deigns to do anything about it, I'm going to make sure to invite everybody to come that night so you can stand up there with me, because it really isn't just about me. So congratulations. A worm in can look like, but you should go on the internet and find one that you like, because I've seen pictures of them in people's dining rooms, shoved under a banquet table thing on the side. They could be anywhere, and they don't smell because the worms are constantly eating everything, and when it comes out, it doesn't smell of anything. So I made this one out of sunbrella fabric, which is you can get for $9 a yard at the F&S outlet on Pico. But Dawn is going to tell us in a minute what is actually the preferred fabric if you're going to make your own. This might not be heavyweight enough. And what you do is you have something that tapers down, and it has this at the bottom, which you can open it up to get out your casings when you have casings to get out. And then when you don't want anything to fall out, you cinch it up with this, and you put a container under it so that when there's worm tea, the worm tea won't be all over your garden or your sidewalk or whatever. You can distribute it in the bin. Then on top, you have a zipper. Oh, don't stick. And that keeps flies out. You can get probably heavier duty window screening. I just used whatever, this is probably wedding dress tool from the fabric store.
Or tutu tool. It's a good wedding gift.
It's very easy to make. If you have a sewing machine, you can do it in a half hour. Then I had a trade, because I made a worm bin for Steve Huff. You know Steve with the city, and he's really good with PVC pipe. So he made me this thing, which is very sturdy, extremely lightweight, and it doesn't take any tools. All you have to do is just cut the pipe with a hacksaw, probably. Cuts the pipe. What?
PVC pipe cutter.
No, he has pipe cutter. I don't think I have that. And then there's these connectors that you get, these Y connectors. You get them at the same place at the hardware store. So it's kind of like Tinker Toys, putting it together. But you can do any kind of connection. If you have an old, I saw pictures of this, if you have one of those college things that were on wheels that you put your
The
clothes
laundry
in your dorm room. You just
Yeah.
take the shelves out and you hang. I've seen pictures of people making these out of old laundry duffels.
Yeah.
They just turn them upside down, cut off the bottom, put on the netting, and you already have the
Yeah, you already have
cinch
the
of the, so it can be made out of recycled materials. I have invited here today Don Smith. He is a vermiculturist and just appears to know absolutely everything about compost and worms. So he's going to show us how to load the worm bin so that when you go home and you do this at home, you'll know the right way to do it. And I've tried to bring the ingredients they said on the website, like an egg carton, a cardboard egg carton, newspapers, and oh, I'm very excited. Horse manure.
Yay.
Yay.
I've been drying it out on the side of my
Thank
house,
you.
spread out flat for